button is an object that a user interacts with to perform an action. Typically, buttons are used to trigger coded events. Some of the commonly used properties are the name. It's a unique ID to refer to a specific button in code. You generally have many buttons in code. The enable property. This is a control that is visible but cannot be used by the user unless this property is set to true. In other words, you can set the property to unenabled or enabled to false, and the button will appear. It'll be seen there, but you can't click on it. The font property. There's a name. You can specify the font you're going to use for the text. There's a size. You can specify the display size of the text. And there's bold, which can set to true or false, bold or not bold. Location property sets the X location or horizontal position on the form. The Y location is the vertical position of the button on the form. Some commonly used properties continued are size. You can have a width property, which is the size of the button in pixels, the width, and the height is the height of the control, the button control, in pixels. There's a tab index control. It's a sequence or order in which this control will get the focus when the user hits the tab key. In other words, you could have an exit button and a calculate button on the bottom, and you can tab to those, the calculate and the exit button, rather than picking up the mouse and sitting on it. So the tab index is very, very important. Text, what is displayed on the label? Exit button, control, execute, whatever. Text alignment, the alignment of a text within the control. The default is middle center. That's generally where you're going to see your text appear. It's in the middle center of the button. There's a visible property. It can be set to true or false. The default is true, but it can be set to false and often is when you don't want the control to be seen by the user. The default event for the button is the click event. It causes the code to be executed when click. Let's take a look at some of this. Put a button on the form by double clicking on it, and there it appears. We can go right up to the top here and set the name of the button that we use for it in code. I'll call it BTN using Hungarian notation. We'll call it calculate. We're not going to calculate anything, but we'll just call it button calculate. That gives it a name. Next thing we want to do is kind of change the image of this thing by actually going in there and saying I want this to be calculate. So I'll set that calculate property in the text here to calculate. Next thing I'd like to do is maybe make this a little bolder. We're going to go ahead and change this font, and we'll set it to 12. And we'll set it to bold. And I'll leave the sans serif type here. Notice my button has changed. The text inside is much larger now. That's going to allow me to change the button size by using the little squares in the corner here. Or I could go down here and actually go ahead and change it via the size properties right here, my X and Y. 113, 143. I'll change this to 50 once. You'll see it slightly change. There, a little bit got a little bit larger there. So that's how the button works. Same with location. We see that it is sitting here at 180 and 63. By moving it, I can move it like this, and it changes. I can change this property right here to 150 again, and it comes back to where it's supposed to be. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually disenable the property. The enable property is true right now. I'm going to set the false, and I'm going to go ahead and save this and run this program so you can see what the button looks like. Here's our button. Notice it's a little bit fainter. You can't really click on it or do anything because it's not enabled. We'll take that off of there and we'll change this back to true. And now we'll run it. Do a file save and save all and run it. And now we see it much brighter and we can click on it. Oh, there's nothing to do because we have no code written for it. We'll write some code. We'll double click on the button, which has been named. We've named this thing button calculate. And I'll double click on it and our code window, let's give it a toolbox. Private button calculate is sitting right here. I can use a message box then. And I can put in hello world again. And put a semicolon at the end of this thing. And we're set to go. Again, I'll do a control save. Do a start. Our button comes up. We can now click on the event. Hello world. One last thing I can do with this property is go to the button itself and set it to invisible by changing the property to false. And now if I run my program, and when the program comes up, you'll see there's no button showing here. It's invisible. That's the extent of it. Change it back to visible, and we're off and running once again. And everything works just fine. Hello world pops up. We're good to go. That's the button in a nutshell.